Pack your bag and leave, the fiancé ordered. Seconds later, the maid's Toddler turned the tables. She had never lost a single game in her life. Not once. And she was not about to lose to a 2-year-old girl who couldn't even tie her own shoes. The whole room went silent the second she called out that little girl. A maid's daughter, barely walking steady, with big brown eyes that seemed to see right through every wall in that mansion. Everyone thought they knew what was going to happen next. The fiancé was certain she knew. The billionaire stood quietly in the corner. But none of them, not a single person in that room, was ready for what that tiny child was about to do. Welcome back to Heart and Soul Stories, where real human moments remind us what life is truly about. We're so glad you're here today. Hey! Drop your flag in the comments right now and tell us what country you're watching from. We love seeing where our family comes from. Now, stay with us for this one because this story is going to surprise you in a way you absolutely did not see coming. We promise. A house full of rules, and one little girl who didn't know them yet. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive in Cloverfield, Kentucky, a quiet neighborhood of big lawns, clean driveways, and the kind of houses where everything always looked perfect from the outside. The estate itself was the grandest home on the street. 6 bedrooms, a fountain in the front yard, tall white columns at the entrance, and rooms that smelled faintly of fresh flowers and expensive wood polish. People in town didn't just admire the house. They talked about it. They pointed at it when driving past. To most people in Cloverfield, the Whitmore estate was a symbol of everything a person could work toward. Daniel Whitmore, 34 years old, had built his wealth the quiet and steady way. Through smart investments in real estate and a small tech company he had launched from his garage 10 years earlier. He was not the flashiest man in the room. He didn't drive the loudest car or wear the shiniest watch. But he was the kind of man who always noticed things. The way someone spoke to a waiter. Whether a person looked you in the eye when they shook your hand. He had grown up without much, raised by a single mother in a small apartment 3 towns over. And he had never forgotten where he came from. That mattered to him more than anything he had ever bought. His home was run largely by a small staff, a groundskeeper named Roy who had worked there for years, a part-time chef named Marcus who came in on weekends, and a housekeeper named Gloria Chen. Gloria was 41 years old. She had come to work at the Whitmore estate 3 years ago, after a difficult divorce left her raising her daughter alone. She was a quiet woman, careful, dependable, always a little tired around the eyes but never complaining. She cleaned with precision, kept track of every detail in the house, and was unfailingly polite to everyone she met. Daniel trusted her completely. She was not just an employee to him. She was a person, and he made sure she and her daughter, Maya, felt welcome in his home. Maya was 2.5 years old. She was the smallest, roundest, most serious-looking toddler you had ever seen in your life. She had her mother's dark hair, cut into a blunt little bob that always looked slightly crooked. She walked everywhere with tremendous purpose, as if she was always on her way to an important meeting. She rarely cried. She didn't babble nonsense the way most children her age did. Instead, she watched. She sat quietly in corners, in doorways, on the edge of rugs, and she watched everything happening around her with those enormous brown eyes. Absorbing, processing, storing away. Daniel adored Maya. He had started keeping a small basket of toys in the sitting room for her, and sometimes on Saturday mornings, while Gloria cleaned the upstairs, Maya would wander into the kitchen and Daniel would sit on the floor with her and stack wooden blocks while his coffee went cold. He never found that strange. He found it peaceful. What was not peaceful, at least not anymore, was the presence of Serena Klaus. Serena had come into Daniel's life 14 months ago, introduced through mutual friends at a charity gala in Louisville. She was beautiful in the way that stopped people mid-sentence. Tall, sharp-featured, always dressed as if she knew cameras might appear. She was the daughter of a wealthy family from Nashville, and she had grown up in a world where status was not just important. It was everything. She was intelligent. She was charming when she wanted to be. And she had decided very quickly that Daniel Whitmore was exactly the kind of man she intended to marry. The engagement had been announced 6 months ago. A ring that caught light from across the room. Party at a restaurant downtown. Photographs that made it into the local society page. But inside the Whitmore estate, things were less perfect than the photograph suggested. Serena had opinions about the house, about the staff, about the way things were run. She never raised her voice. She was too polished for that. She simply made comments. Small, clean, precise comments delivered with a smile. Comments about how the kitchen could be more efficiently organized. Comments about how some of the decor looked a little dated. Comments about how perhaps some of the staff arrangements might need to be reconsidered. That last category always circled back to Gloria. Serena did not like Gloria Chin. She would never have said it that plainly. She would not have wanted to seem that way. But it showed in 100 small moments. The way she would inspect surfaces after Gloria cleaned them, running a fingertip along a shelf. The way she addressed Gloria, never rudely but never warmly either, always with a kind of deliberate distance, like she was reminding Gloria of exactly where she stood in the order of things. And it showed in the way she looked at Maya. To Serena, a toddler underfoot in a billionaire's home was not charming. It was not sweet. It was disorganized. It was inappropriate. And every time she watched Daniel get down on the kitchen floor to play blocks with a 2-year-old, something behind her eyes went very still and very cold. She had not said anything yet. Not directly. But people who have decided something, really decided, always find their moment eventually. Do you think Daniel noticed how Serena treated Gloria and Maya? What would you have done in his place? Tell us in the comments. The house began to feel smaller, and the tension bigger. The Sunday afternoon in October started the same way most Sundays did at the Whitmore estate. Marcus had been in earlier to prepare lunch. Roy had raked the last of the fallen leaves off the front lawn. Gloria had finished cleaning the upstairs and was now quietly organizing the linen closet near the main hallway. Maya, as she always did when her mother worked, had settled herself in her usual spot, the wide doorway between the sitting room and the hall, cross-legged on the hardwood floor watching. What Maya was watching that Sunday was the chess match. Daniel had recently gotten back into chess. An old friend from college, James, had been coming over every few weeks to play, and the two of them would sit at the mahogany table in the sitting room for hours, moving pieces with focused quiet, occasionally talking, mostly just thinking. Daniel had never been a spectacular chess player, but he loved the game for what it required. Patience, attention, the ability to think several steps ahead. Serena had started watching these matches too. At first, she had done it from the couch with a magazine, glancing over occasionally with mild interest. But Serena was competitive by nature, and she had grown up playing chess with her father. Within 3 visits, she had challenged James to a game herself. She had won. The following Sunday she challenged Daniel. She won that too. And then she kept winning. The sitting room on chess Sundays became Serena's stage. She moved pieces with a kind of theatrical confidence, explaining her choices with a smile, occasionally sighing with gentle patience when Daniel miscalculated. She was good. Genuinely good. But she was also aware of how she looked being good, poised and sharp, in control. And that awareness was just as much a part of her game as the actual moves. What nobody had fully registered, or rather what nobody had thought to look at, was Maya. The toddler was always there, cross-legged in the doorway, watching the board, watching the hands that moved the pieces, watching the faces of the people who played. She never touched the board. She never reached for the pieces. She simply watched with that particular stillness she had, the kind of stillness that made adults forget she was in the room. Gloria noticed once that Maya's eyes followed the chess pieces across the board. She had smiled at her daughter, that tired, warm smile, and gone back to work. She didn't think much of it. Children watch everything. It's what they do. Meanwhile, the tension in the house continued to build around the edges of things. Serena had begun to make comments about the living situation with increased frequency. She mentioned over dinner one evening that she thought it might be more professional if the housekeeper's work hours were structured so that the child wasn't in the house during certain parts of the day. She mentioned it gently, reasonably, with a light little laugh that implied she was only thinking about order and efficiency. Daniel had listened quietly and not responded directly, but his jaw had tightened just slightly, the way it did when he was holding something back. Gloria had been folding linens in the next room and had heard every word. She had continued folding, slowly, without changing her expression. But her hands had gone very still for a moment. The next afternoon, Serena had come into the kitchen and found Maya sitting on the floor near Gloria's feet, lining up a row of wooden blocks in a very specific pattern. Not randomly, but in a deliberate sequence that she kept adjusting, studying, adjusting again. Serena had watched her for a moment. Then she had said lightly to no one in particular, "Children really shouldn't be playing on kitchen floors." Gloria had said very quietly, "Yes, ma'am." Maya had looked up at Serena with those enormous brown eyes. She had not seemed frightened. She had not seemed bothered. She had simply looked, steadily, calmly, the way she always looked at things she was figuring out. And then she had gone back to her blocks. Serena had not liked that look. She hadn't been able to explain why, exactly. A 2-year-old couldn't be accused of anything. But something about the evenness of that gaze, the complete lack of intimidation in it, had gotten under her skin in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. The stage was being set for something. You could feel it, the way you can always feel in a quiet house when something is about to stop being quiet. The following Sunday, a group of guests arrived for what Daniel had planned as a low-key afternoon gathering. For friends, some wine, a late lunch. Among them was James, and it wasn't long before the chessboard came out. A small audience settled around the table in the sitting room. And Serena, as she always did, was ready. She had won the first match against James in 12 moves. She had won the second against a friend named Paul in 9. The small crowd had laughed and applauded and told her she was remarkable. She had smiled with that particular smile, the one that agreed. And then someone had made a joke. "At this point," Paul had said, laughing, "you'd probably beat anyone in this room. Even little Maya over there." He had said it as a throwaway comment. Just a laugh. Just a light little observation about the toddler sitting silently in the doorway, watching as always. Serena had turned and looked at Maya. And something in her had made a decision. Have you ever been around someone who seemed to be competing even when there was no competition? How did that make you feel? Tell us in the comments. And then, the moment no one in that room would ever forget. The silence that followed Paul's joke lasted only a second or two. But in that second, Serena had already made up her mind. She turned fully in her chair, crossed one leg over the other with that practiced elegance she always carried, and looked at Maya in the doorway with a wide, bright smile. "You know what?" she said, her voice carrying across the sitting room with casual ease. "Why not? Let's let Maya try." Few people laughed nervously. Daniel looked up from his wine glass. Gloria, who had been passing through the hallway with a small stack of folded towels, stopped in place. "Serena," Daniel said quietly. "No, it'll be fun," Serena said, waving a hand. "Come on. Just a game. What's the harm?" The room watched. Maya, in the doorway, looked at the chessboard. Then she looked at Serena. Then she stood up, with that unhurried, purposeful way she always moved, and walked toward the table. She was 2 feet tall. The table came up to her shoulders. Gloria had set down the towels and crossed the room quietly, reaching for her daughter. "She's too small, she doesn't." "Let her try," Serena said, and her voice had taken on a firmer edge beneath the lightness. "It's just a few moves. She can sit on the chair." Daniel stood, lifted Maya, and seated her on the tall chair across from Serena, holding her steady for a moment. Maya looked at the board. Her expression was the same as always. Calm, studying, unhurried. Serena arranged the pieces with theatrical patience, narrating what each one was for the benefit of the audience. This is the king. This is the queen. These little ones are pawns. She smiled across the table at the toddler. Do you understand, sweetheart? Maya's eyes moved across the board. She said nothing. We'll start simple, Serena said brightly. White goes first. I'll make it easy. She made her opening move. A standard opening, nothing aggressive. She sat back with a smile. For 5 long seconds Maya looked at the board. The room was very quiet. And then Maya reached out one small hand and moved a piece. Not randomly. Not with the clumsy grab of a child reaching for something shiny. With deliberate placement. Set down at a specific square with a small, definitive click. Someone in the room drew a breath. Serena's smile didn't waver. Oh, lucky guess, she said pleasantly, and made her second move. Stronger now, setting up a line of pressure. Maya looked at the board again. 5 seconds. She moved another piece. Serena's smile became a fraction more fixed. She studied the board. She made her move. Maya moved. Immediate this time. No hesitation. And then something shifted in the room. Something invisible but unmistakable. Because Serena was leaning forward now. The light, theatrical quality had gone out of her posture. She was actually looking at the board. Actually reading it. Because something on that board was, the positioning was. She's been watching us, Daniel said softly from the side of the room. His voice was not surprised exactly. It was quiet in a way that meant something else. She had been watching them. Every Sunday for months. Cross-legged in the doorway, those wide brown eyes following every piece, every hand, every expression. And 2-year-old Maya Chen, who could not yet read a single word, who still sometimes lost her balance when she ran on the lawn, had been building something in that silent, watchful mind of hers. A map of the game, move by move, week by week, without anyone ever thinking to look at her long enough to notice. Serena made a move. It was the right move. Strong move. But her hands were not quite as steady as usual. Maya looked at the board. She moved. And in the next 3 moves, it was over. Serena stared at the board. The room stared at the board. Daniel stared at the board. The silence lasted a full 4 seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. And then James, in the corner, let out a single short laugh. The involuntary kind that escapes before you can stop it. Someone else followed. And then the whole room was laughing and talking at once, voices tumbling over each other. Did she just... Wait, how did... She's 2.5 years old. Serena pushed back her chair. Her face was still arranged in the correct expression. A smile technically still present, but her cheeks had gone deep red and her eyes had gone somewhere very flat and very private. Well, she said, standing, her voice perfectly controlled. That was entertaining. She looked at Gloria, standing near the doorway, holding the towels she had never put down. And something that had been building in Serena for months came to the surface then. Not loudly, but with a precision that was worse than loud. This was cute, she said, turning back to the room with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. But I think we can all agree, she looked at Gloria again, that this kind of thing is not really appropriate. A staff member's child should not be participating in household gatherings. It's not professional. And frankly, it's not fair to anyone. She looked at Daniel. I think it's time, she said clearly, to reconsider the living situation here. The room had gone silent again. A different kind of silent. Gloria stood very still, one arm curling slightly toward Maya, who had climbed down from the chair and walked back toward her mother. Daniel looked at Serena for a long moment. He said nothing. Serena held his gaze. I'm not being unreasonable, she said. Her voice was very even. I'm being practical. There need to be proper boundaries. That's all I'm saying. She gathered her composure and walked past the chess table, past the guests, out of the sitting room. Gloria looked down at Maya. Maya was looking up at her mother with that same calm, steady gaze. She reached up and took Gloria's hand. What would you do if you were in Gloria's place right now? After everything that just happened? Tell us honestly in the comments. She was supposed to be the one who won, and she had no idea what to do with losing. The guests left soon after. The afternoon that had begun with laughter and wine and good food ended with cars in the driveway and quiet goodbyes in a house that felt, somehow, several degrees colder than it had before. Daniel found Gloria in the kitchen, washing the last of the lunch dishes with the careful, methodical focus she brought to everything. Maya was asleep on the small cot in the side room off the kitchen, the space Gloria used as a rest area during long days. Her small chest rose and fell. A wooden block was still clutched in one hand. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment. "Gloria," he said. He turned. There were no tears on her face. Her expression was composed in the way that costs a person something, the kind of composure that is not peace, but its replacement. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "What happened today was not okay." Gloria nodded once. She wasn't wrong that it was unconventional, she said, and her voice was steady and measured. Maya being here, in the way she is. She was wrong, Daniel said quietly. About the way she said it. About what she implied. That's what I'm apologizing for. Gloria looked at him. She nodded again, smaller this time. I'm not going to ask you to leave, Daniel said. You're not going anywhere. Neither is Maya. That's not a conversation that's happening. He said it simply. Not grandly. Just as a fact. Gloria let out a small exhale, barely audible, and turned back to the dishes. Serena, meanwhile, had gone upstairs. The door to the guest room she had been using more and more frequently closed with a soft, deliberate click. And then it did not open again that evening. Nor that night. Nor the following morning. She had brought the situation to Daniel with confidence, expecting him to agree, or at least to manage it, to handle it in the efficient, decisive way he usually handled complicated things. She had expected acknowledgement, validation, agreement that she was simply being practical and clear-headed and right. She had not expected him to look at her the way he had looked at her in that sitting room. Not angry. Something worse than angry. Disappointed. The specific look of a person who has realized something they had been trying not to realize. And she had not expected to lose a chess game to a child who was still in diapers. She sat in the guest room through the evening and into the next day, going over it. The way the room had laughed, the way James had made that sound, the way Daniel had said those words, "She's been watching us," in that quiet voice. The way the board had looked at the end. The way Gloria had stood there with those towels and that expression that hadn't even been smug, which somehow made it worse. Gloria had simply looked sad. And Maya had simply taken her mother's hand. Serena was not someone who examined her own behavior easily. She had grown up in a world where the most important thing was how things appeared, what category you belonged to, where you stood in the order. Vulnerability was weakness. Losing was unacceptable. And the people below you in the order, the staff, the employees, the workers, were not people you competed with. They were not people you lost to. The humiliation was not just that she had lost. It was that she had chosen to compete with a toddler, in front of a room full of people, because she had needed to prove something. And she had known, even in the moment of choosing it, that it was not a generous impulse. It was not a kind one. She had looked at that small, quiet child and wanted to diminish her. She had wanted to produce a spectacle for the room. The sophisticated fiancé patiently indulging the maid's little girl, winning with easy grace, everyone laughing, everything reinforcing the order she believed in. And instead, on the second morning there was a knock at the guest room door. Serena didn't answer immediately. The knock came again. Small, patient, very quiet. She crossed the room and opened the door. Daniel was standing in the hall. And beside him, one hand in his, was Maya. Maya was holding something, a chess piece. The White Queen. She held it out toward Serena with both hands, the way toddlers offer things, with complete sincerity, as if there is no other possible way to give something. Serena looked at the chess piece in those small hands. Daniel said nothing. He didn't need to. Serena knelt down. Not elegantly, not with calculation, just down, until she was at Maya's eye level. She looked at the child's face. Maya looked back at her with those wide, calm eyes. Not triumphant. Not afraid. Just present. Serena's throat tightened. She does this, Daniel said quietly, from above her. She finds something that belongs to the person who looks like they need it. She's been doing it since she could walk. Gloria thinks it's her way of trying to fix things. Serena looked up at him. I think, she said slowly, and her voice came out rougher than she intended. I owe some people an apology. Daniel nodded once. Simple. Without making a production of it. She looked back at Maya. The toddler was still holding out the chess queen, both arms extended, patient and completely serious. Serena took the piece gently from those small hands. She held it for a moment. It was warm from being carried. Thank you, she said to Maya. Maya considered her for a moment. Then she turned around and walked back down the hallway with her characteristic purposeful gait, as if the matter had been handled and she had somewhere else to be. Have you ever had to do something genuinely hard? Not because you had to, but because it was the right thing. Share your story below. She had walked into that room to win. She walked out of it changed. The apology was not grand. It did not happen in front of a room full of people to balance out the humiliation that had happened in front of a room full of people. Serena had considered that, the symmetry of it, the performance of it, and then she had set the idea aside. Because performance was the exact thing that had gotten her here. She found Gloria late in the afternoon, in the linen closet off the main hallway. The same place Gloria was always organizing, always working with that steady, quiet efficiency. Serena stood in the doorway. Gloria turned, registered who it was, and went still in the careful way she always went still around Serena, a kind of controlled waiting. I want to apologize to you, Serena said. Not for what happened with Maya and the chess game. For the way I've been treating you for the past several months. Comments. The way I spoke to you. The way I made you feel like you were less than what you are. Gloria watched her. I was wrong, Serena said. I knew I was being unkind, and I told myself it was something else. That it was about professionalism or efficiency or standards. And none of that was true. Pause. I was threatened by you. By the fact that Daniel respects you. That Maya matters to him. That this place, this house, already had a warmth in it before I arrived, and I couldn't figure out how to fit into it, so I tried to change it to fit me. She stopped again. That's not something I'm proud of. The hallway was very quiet. Gloria set down the towels in her hands. Thank you, she said. Her voice was even, measured, carefully held. But her eyes were less guarded than usual. That means something. To say it directly. It means something. Serena nodded. She didn't push for more. She didn't try to turn the moment into something warmer or broader than it was. She had done the thing that needed doing, and she let it stand on its own. The days that followed were quieter in a different way. Not the cold quiet of held tension, but the softer quiet of things beginning very slowly to settle. Serena did not become a different person overnight. She was still precise. She still had opinions. She still sat at the chess table on Sundays with that focused competitive energy that was simply part of who she was. But she began to watch Maya the way Daniel watched Maya, with actual attention. Not as an inconvenience. Not as a category. As a person. And Maya, who seemed to have no memory of chess games or cold looks or held-out chess pieces, simply continued being Maya. Cross-legged in doorways. Serious and watchful. building block sequences on the kitchen floor with great concentration, wandering into the sitting room on Saturday mornings to stack wooden blocks while Daniel's coffee went cold. One Sunday afternoon in November, about 3 weeks after that October gathering, Serena was at the chess table between games. The board was set up. No opponent yet. She was studying a position she had been thinking about. A small hand appeared on the edge of the table. Serena looked down. Maya had climbed up onto the chair across from her. Or at least, she was attempting to climb up onto the chair, with a determined inefficiency of a toddler who was not going to ask for help. Serena watched for a moment, then reached across and steadied the chair so it didn't tip. Maya hauled herself up, settled herself, and looked at the board. "You want to play," Serena said. Maya looked at the pieces. Then she looked at Serena. She reached out and moved a pawn. Serena was quiet for a moment. Then she moved her own. The game took 11 minutes. Serena won. Genuinely, not by holding back, because she had decided that doing it any other way would not be a kindness. When it was over, she looked across the board at the small, serious face studying the positions of the remaining pieces. "You almost had me in the middle," Serena said. "Did you see where you could have gone differently?" Maya pointed to a square on the board. Serena looked at it. She was right. "Yeah," Serena said softly. "Exactly that." Daniel, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway with a mug of coffee, didn't say anything. He turned and went back to the counter. He was smiling in the quiet, private way he smiled when something felt like it was finally right. What Maya could not have known, and what Serena herself only understood slowly over the weeks that followed, was that the game she had really been losing for months had nothing to do with chess. It was the game of deciding what kind of person you are going to be when no one is holding you accountable. When you have the position and the ring and the status, and the person who might call you out is a quiet woman in a linen closet and her 2-year-old daughter. What do you choose to be? Gloria once said to Daniel, near the end of that year, that Maya had always been a strange child because she never seemed to need people to explain things to her. She seemed to understand things from watching. "I don't know where she gets it," Gloria said. Daniel had thought about this for a moment. "She gets it from you," he said. "You've been watching and understanding things quietly for years. She just learned it young." What this story knows and what it wants to leave with you is this: the people who humble us most are rarely the people we expect. They are not always the ones with the titles or the rooms or the rings. Sometimes they are cross-legged in a doorway. Sometimes they have brown eyes and a wooden block in one hand and more patience than most adults ever find. And the real game, the only one that ever counted, was never on any board. It was always in how we chose to treat the people we thought could not touch us. The people who look up at us. The ones we forget are watching. Thank you for spending this time with us today. This story is a reminder that real strength isn't in winning every game. It's in having the courage to ask yourself why you needed to win in the first place. We hope something here stayed with you. If it did, you'll know what to do. If this story touched your heart in any way, if you found yourself rooting for little Maya or feeling something for Gloria, or maybe even understanding Serena just a little by the end, please hit that like button. It honestly means the world to us and helps more people find stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love to have you here. We share real, emotional human stories every single week. Stories that will make you feel something, think about something, and believe in people again. Now we want to hear from you. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it Maya at the chessboard? Was it Gloria in the hallway? Or was it that moment when Serena knelt down? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like this today, someone going through something hard, or someone who just needs a reminder that people can change, send this to them. You never know what one story can do for a person. Until next time, take care of each other. We'll see you in the next one.